guards wouldn't meet his eyes. When Carlos Herrera Sr. stepped into the visitation hall that October afternoon, the place felt too warm for a building made of concrete. Fluorescence hummed. A fan wobbled on its mount, pushing air that smelled like bleach and old pipes. Chairs scraped. People talked in low voices, the way you do in hospitals and courtrooms, trying not to disturb whatever decisions get made in rooms like this. At a table near the end sat a man in khaki inmate clothes, elbows bandaged in dingy gauze, one eye the color of rotten plums. He kept his hands folded under the edge of the table like he was afraid to show them. When he finally looked up and saw Carlos, something caved in behind his expression, like a shelf giving out under a hidden weight. They didn't shake hands. They said their names softly, almost like apologies. For a few seconds, neither of them added anything. The hum of the lights pressed down on the space between them. "You know why I'm here?" Carlos said. The inmate nodded. "Your son, Juan." Good evening, and welcome to Midnight Horror Society. Here we take the strange and the chilling and tell them slowly, like whispers meant for the night. Before we begin, take a second to like the video and subscribe only if you feel at home here. In the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always comforting to see how many of us are awake together in the dark. So dim the lights. Let the sound of the night, rain, crickets, or just the quiet of your room settle around you. Get comfortable. And when you're ready, let's step into tonight's story. For almost a month, the prison had been on its own clock. Tocorón, officially the Aragua Penitentiary Center, had slipped out of the hands of the state and into the grip of men who already ruled the corridors long before the gates were locked. Inside those long, low buildings where cinder block walls trapped the heat and made it hum, the guards had retreated to the perimeter and the gangs had taken the middle. Everyone in Venezuela knew it. The nightly news made it plain. Plumes of smoke rose like flags over the compound. Helicopters circled. The government issued phrases like dialogue and stabilization. The name that traveled fastest through the rumor channels was old and ugly: Dorangel Vargas, El Comediante, a man already infamous long before Tocorón. People knew the stories from earlier years. Even those who didn't believe them remembered the nickname and the way it stuck to him like a smell you couldn't wash away. Inside the prison, the name meant a different thing: a center of gravity, a man who could decide what happened next. Juan Herrera Jr. had been there a year, serving time for robbery. 23, quick on his feet, the sort of kid who apologized in one breath and argued in the next. He'd written letters home at first. "I'm good, Papa. It's hot. Food is bad. I'm staying clear of trouble." Then, as the tension grew, the letters got shorter. Then they stopped. The riot sealed everything off. For days, the only updates came from people who had people inside: wives, cousins, mothers. A guy who claimed his brother's friend had stood on a laundry roof and watched a beating in the yard. The government said the situation was under control. The families heard gunshots in the background of smuggled calls. When the military finally pushed in, when the gates yawned and the uniforms moved back through the middle and the smoke thinned, the list started: injured, dead, transferred, present for muster. The lists were incomplete, which is another way of saying they were useless. They did not hold Juan's name. Carlos did what fathers do when the official lines go dead. He showed up in person. He stood at the outer fence, sweating through his shirt in the dry heat, holding a plastic folder with his son's photo and the little proof of life details only a family carries: a vaccination card, a school certificate, a copy of a letter that begins Papa and ends with an uneven heart, as if the pen had quivered there. He spoke to anyone who would stop. Guards coming off shift, a clerk with a clipboard, a man in a plain shirt who might have been a supervisor. He learned the posture of people who don't want to answer. He learned to hate the phrase "estamos verificando." We're verifying, because it meant exactly nothing. The name of a survivor reached him through another prisoner's wife. He knows, she told him. Low and tight, like the words were contraband. He saw something. He'll talk. She didn't say why. Maybe the man had lost someone too. Maybe he was too hurt to be afraid yet. Maybe he was hoping that if he told this one father what he knew, God would take notice and do something about the balance of things. That's how Carlos ended up at the plastic table, staring at the bandages and the bruises and a man who could not meet his eyes. At first, the man said nothing about Juan. He spoke about Vargas, how when the first alarm sounded and the sound of boots receded toward the gates, he and his people came forward like a tide that had been waiting for the pull. He spoke quietly, as if the name itself could cut him if he mishandled it. The guards stopped giving orders, the inmate said. We started getting them from him. He said Vargas moved like a man accustomed to being watched, not nervously, but with the ease of somebody who believes the watching is part of the point. Men followed him with machetes, scavenged from the maintenance sheds and rifles that had been in the prison before anyone would admit it. People you didn't see often became visible, and people you saw every day slipped into the shadows. The order of things reversed. The first week, the electricity flickered and died in pieces. The kitchen kept hours, only men with knives respected. The taps coughed rust and quit. Barrels appeared like magic, filled from a hose spliced into a line no one claimed to know existed. Where there had been rules, there were now favors. Where there had been routines, there were cues, whose lengths were decided by the size of the men standing near them. Everyone was hungry, the man said. Not the kind that makes you angry. The kind that makes your head buzz. Small economies sprang up. A half bar of soap for a tin of sardines, a pack of cigarettes for 2 cups of rice. Some men traded the shirts off their backs for a bowl of something thin and salty. Others hoarded and were beaten for it. No one slept. The lights didn't allow it, and the fear wouldn't either. It took Carlos a second to realize the man was holding his breath between sentences, as if he were diving for them. He made himself wait. He did not push for Juan's name. He ran the food, the man finally said. And the way he said he could have meant Vargas, could have meant the idea of hunger made into a person. He said nobody under him would starve. Carlos felt the smallest thaw of relief. If there was food, there was a system. If there was a system, there was a way to bargain a son through it. My boy, he said carefully. Did you see him? The man nodded once. Your boy helped, the man said. Carrying sacks, taking lists, doing what they told him. The relief stalled. Doing what they told him is not the same as safe. It's a phrase that can mean survival. It can also mean you have been noticed by the wrong person. Outside the visitation hall window, the late afternoon slid along the compound wall like a bright knife. Somewhere in the administrative building, a copier coughed and fell silent. In that ordinary sound, Carlos felt the rough edge of fury. How could there be photocopies and coffee cups and men stamping forms, while a father sat here trying to learn whether his son's name belonged on a list at all? He gripped the table. Tell me what you saw, he said. Please. The inmate stared at his bandaged hands. When he finally spoke, it came out like a confession. I saw the lines. I saw the pot. And later I saw a shoe by the ash. Carlos's mouth went dry. A shoe? The man's one good eye filled. His eyes like a boy's. He took a shaky breath and continued. Vargas had begun to hold gatherings in the gymnasium. Men stood on the bleachers, knees against the metal slats, while orders were read. People who asked questions were corrected in front of others. Not enough to kill them, just enough to show how easily it could be done. Vargas spoke about loyalty and survival, the way a commander does when he wants the words to feel like food. The rumors ran in circles. Supplies were coming. They'd cut a deal. A truck got through. The kitchen fires burned hotter one evening, and smoke curled from the vents with a different smell. Unfamiliar, fatty, like the scent of cooked meat that doesn't match any memory you trust. The lines formed without anyone having to be told. Bowls filled, spoons scraped. Some men ate quickly. Some ate with their heads turned, the way you do when you're trying not to look directly at something. Some whispered to each other without moving their lips, sharing the kind of rumor no one should have to consider. The inmate swallowed. His voice thinned. They told us it was different cuts from animals, that the outside sent it, that we were lucky. He looked like he might be sick. I wanted to believe that. Carlos's fingers ached. He only then realized he'd been squeezing his hands together under the table. He forced them open. Like so many men his age, he had learned that you can sometimes control your voice if you can control your hands. "When did you see my son last?" he asked. The inmate closed his eyes for a moment, and for that moment Carlos wanted to shout at him not to do that, not to put a dark pane over the one clear window he had left. But the man opened them again. "He was carrying a crate," he said. "He looked tired, but he was walking. He had a list in his hand. He told someone he'd be back. Back where?" The man shrugged helplessly, a child's gesture in a broken body. "I don't know," he said. "It was loud. Everyone was moving. I thought I would see him again." He pressed his palms flat on the tabletop as if he were bracing himself against something that might still be coming. "They said the hunger was over," he whispered. "They said nobody would go to sleep hungry again. They told us not to ask," he said. "They said there had been a delivery in the night. They said whoever was complaining could wait outside the line and watch other men eat." He glanced at Carlos and then away again. "A man made a joke about the taste," he said softly. "Another man told him to shut his mouth if he wanted to keep it." Carlos's throat burned. He felt the familiar desire to grab the edge of the world and pull it straight. And he knew the world does not move like that for any father. He asked the only question left. "My son," he said. "Where is he?" The inmate stared at the floor. "The last time I saw him," he said, "he was walking toward the kitchen with a list in his hand." He swallowed. "I didn't see him come back." He told Carlos what other men had told him, and how testimony in a place like Tocorón slides like oil across the surface of things, refusing to mix with anything that might hold it to account. He told him about a rumor that someone had seen Vargas in the kitchen doorway, not eating, only watching. He told him about a shoe by the ash. He told him that later, when the military came, some men refused to eat anything at all, not because there was nothing, there was something, suddenly, but because the smell of it pulled a thread inside them that would not stop pulling once it began. He did not say he saw Juan's body. He did not say he saw Vargas order anything. He did not say he saw the thing everyone had begun to say. But it was in the room between them, a third presence, patient and immovable. "People will tell you there is no proof," the inmate said at last. They are right about that. Proof disappears here. It goes where the light doesn't. But those of us who were there, we know what hunger does. And we know what it did to us. Carlos pressed his palm flat on the bulletin board beside him to keep from falling. Paper crackled under his hand. Notices about schedules, a list of contraband items, a faded reminder to keep the corridors clear. He stared at the ink until it blurred. He asked the last question because he had to. "What did they do?" he said. The inmate shut his eyes once and opened them. His voice was so quiet, Carlos leaned in to hear it. "They fed the prison," he said. The words turned to metal inside Carlos's chest. He didn't remember walking back through the gate, didn't remember the sun, didn't remember the trip across the gravel lot. He remembered the feel of his car key, missing the slot twice before it found it. He remembered the way the steering wheel looked too close to his hands, like a photograph taken with the wrong lens. At home, he took the folder out again. The proof of life documents. The letter with the uneven heart. He set them on the kitchen table. He stared at them so long the light changed twice and the shadows moved across them like silent mouths. He did what fathers do when the world refuses to make space for their grief. He made noise. He stood in front of cameras outside a government building and said his son's name. He described the things he had been told and the things no one would confirm. He used the word cannibalism once and watched the reporters flinch in the same way as the guards in the visitation hall. A reflex of the body when it wants to believe the ears misheard. Officials repeated the phrase. There is no evidence. The phrase is a wall if you want it to be. It is also a door, but you have to have the key. And the key is always kept in a drawer labeled internal. Vargas remained incarcerated. The prison continued. The stories settled into sediment the way they do when too much water has moved over them. And then they were part of the ground everyone walked on without looking down. The story never ended. It only spread out and lay down like a fog and made the edges of things strange. There are places you can visit in Venezuela where the wind smells like sugarcane and diesel and rain. There are places where it smells like the sea and rusted bolts and the sourness of fish scales. Near Tocorón, at certain times of day, it smells like dust and hot metal and the faint, humid tang of kitchens that have nothing left to cook. If you stand there long enough, you might begin to understand how a man could live years inside a question, and how a government can survive by refusing to answer it. No one has been charged in connection with Juan Herrera Jr.'s disappearance. Dorangel Vargas remains in custody. The phrase, no evidence, is still available for anyone who needs it. When people ask what Carlos believes, he doesn't make speeches. He tells them what he heard in a room where the lights hummed, and a man's hands shook and guards kept their eyes on nothing. He says his son carried a list toward a kitchen and did not come back. He says there was a shoe in ash, and bowls of something thick, and a line that moved again like men had been promised it would. He says a broken voice told him 4 words that won't leave the room no matter how many times officials close the door. They fed the prison. He doesn't know if repeating that makes the weight lighter or heavier. He only knows silence feels worse. Have you ever heard a truth so unbearable that denial felt safer than belief? Tell me what you think below.